Standing at my college graduation, I watched my parents beam with pride as they congratulated my twin sister Sarah. 4 years of working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and eating ramen every meal had led to this moment. My parents had refused to pay my tuition because I wasn't their investment-worthy child, while Sarah got everything handed to her. But as the dean called my name for the valedictorian honor, my parents' proud smiles froze. Their faces went completely pale when they realized what they had done. The memory of that crushing conversation 4 years ago still burned in my chest as I sat in my cap and gown, waiting for the ceremony to begin. It was March of our senior year in high school, when everything changed forever. Sarah and I had been sitting at our kitchen table in our suburban Denver home, college acceptance letters spread out like playing cards before us. Both of us had gotten into the State University of Colorado, our dream school, since childhood. Mom had made her famous lasagna that night, the one she only prepared for special occasions. Dad had even left work early, something that never happened at his tech company. I remember thinking this was going to be a celebration dinner, the kind of family moment you see in movies where parents get emotional about their kids growing up. Instead, it became the night my parents showed me exactly where I stood in their hearts. "Kids, your mother and I have been talking." Dad began adjusting his glasses the way he always did when he was nervous. "College is expensive and we need to make some difficult decisions." Sarah reached for my hand under the table, sensing the tension I was already feeling. We had always been close, despite our completely different personalities. She was the cheerleader, the student council president, the one who brought home boyfriends that made our parents glow with pride. I was the kid who spent lunch periods in the art room, who questioned everything in Sunday school, who chose debate team over football. "We've decided to pay for one of you to attend university?" Mom continued, her voice carrying that tone she used when she thought she was being reasonable. "After much consideration, we believe Sarah has the better chance at success." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt Sarah's hand tighten around mine, her sharp intake of breath telling me she was just as shocked as I was. "What do you mean one of us?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay calm. Dad leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Braden, you have to understand this from a practical perspective. Sarah has leadership experience, social skills that translate to business success. She's been class president, twice captain of the cheerleading squad. She knows how to work with people. And I don't..." The question came out sharper than I intended. "You're brilliant academically," Mom jumped in, trying to soften the blow, "but you're also difficult. You argue with teachers, you challenge authority. You chose art classes over practical subjects. We just don't see the same potential for financial success." Sarah finally found her voice. "This isn't fair. Braden's grades are better than mine. He's in advanced placement, everything." "Grades aren't everything, sweetheart," Dad said, reaching over to pat Sarah's arm. "In the real world, it's about networking, social intelligence, fitting in with the right crowd. That's where Sarah excels." I stared at my parents, these people who had raised me, fed me, supposedly loved me, and realized they had been evaluating us like business investments our entire lives. Every parent-teacher conference, every report card, every family dinner had been an assessment of our future earning potential. "So what am I supposed to do?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "There are options," Mom said quickly. "Community college, student loan scholarships. You're smart enough to figure it out." "But Sarah gets a free ride." "Sarah gets our investment," Dad corrected, "because we believe she'll provide the better return." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Sarah cry in the next room. She had tried to refuse their offer to demand they treat us equally, but they had made it clear the money was hers whether she wanted it or not. Taking out loans to pay my own way seemed like the only option that would let me keep my dignity intact. The next 4 years had been a blur of 18-hour days. While Sarah joined a sorority and attended campus parties, I worked at the university library until midnight, then got up at 5 in the morning to stock shelves at the campus bookstore. Weekends meant double shifts at Murphy's Diner downtown serving coffee to professors who knew me as their star student, but had no idea I was scraping together tip money to pay for textbooks. Every semester, I applied for every scholarship available. Every grade had to be perfect because there was no safety net, no family money to fall back on if I failed. While Sarah called home asking for extra spending money, I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and wore the same 3 shirts in rotation. But somehow, sitting here at graduation, it had all been worth it. The dean had called my name first, announcing that I was graduating valedictorian with a perfect 4.0 grade average. I was summa cum laude president of the Academic Honor Society and recipient of the Outstanding Achievement in Computer Science Award. Now, watching my parents clap politely while their faces showed a mixture of shock and confusion, I realized they were finally understanding what their investment strategy had actually cost them. They had bet on the wrong horse, and everyone in this auditorium was about to find out just how wrong they had been. The twist that made my stomach clench was seeing the doubt creep into my mother's eyes as she leaned over to whisper to my father. Her voice carried just enough for me to hear, "How is this possible?" We made the right choice with Sarah, didn't we? The question hung in the air like smoke, and for the first time in 4 years, I saw my parents looking genuinely uncertain about the decision that had shaped all of our lives. The graduation ceremony continued with all the pomp and circumstance that major universities do so well, but I barely heard the speeches. My mind kept drifting back to those 4 years of struggle that had led me to this moment. While other students complained about cafeteria food, I had become an expert at making meals from whatever was cheapest at the discount grocery store. While they talked about spring break trips, I was picking up extra shifts during vacation weeks when the campus was empty. I remembered my sophomore year when I got pneumonia and had to choose between going to the campus health center or paying rent. I chose rent and ended up studying for finals with a fever of 102 degrees. There was my junior year when my laptop died the week before a major programming project was due, and I spent 3 days straight in the computer lab because I couldn't afford to replace it. But there had been victories, 2 small ones, that kept me going. Making the dean's list every single semester, getting nominated for academic honor societies, having professors recommend me for research opportunities that actually paid a little money. Each achievement felt like proof that my parents had made a massive miscalculation. Sarah's name was called, and she walked across the stage with the confident smile that had always come so naturally to her. She had graduated with a bachelor's in communications and a grade point average of 2.8. Respectable, but nothing that would make anyone remember her name. She received her diploma with a wave to our parents, who stood and cheered, as if she had just won an Olympic gold medal. Then came the special recognitions, academic honors research awards, scholarship recipients. My name was called 6 different times. Each time I walked across that stage, I could feel my parents' eyes on me, could sense the growing realization in the audience that the kid they probably assumed was the less successful twin was actually the star of the show. The final announcement was the one that made my chest swell with pride. This year's valedictorian graduating summa cum laude with a perfect grade point average in computer science, Braden Thompson. The applause was thunderous, but all I could focus on was my parents' faces in the crowd. The pride they had shown for Sarah was now mixed with something else, something that looked like regret and confusion. My mother's hand was covering her mouth, and my father was staring at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. After the ceremony, our extended family gathered at Romano's Italian restaurant, the same place we had celebrated every major family milestone since I was a kid. Grandma Helen, Uncle Marcus, Aunt Linda, and my cousins were all there, creating the kind of boisterous family atmosphere that usually made me feel warm and included. But tonight felt different. As we waited for our table, I could feel the tension radiating from my parents. They kept trying to steer conversations toward Sarah's accomplishments, but other family members kept bringing the focus back to my academic achievements. 6 honors in one ceremony, Uncle Marcus said, shaking his head in amazement. I've never seen anything like it, and valedictorian. That's incredible, Braden. We're so proud of both our children, Mom said quickly, her voice carrying a forced cheerfulness that everyone could hear. Sarah has had such a wonderful college experience. She's made so many connections, joined so many organizations. Aunt Linda raised an eyebrow. That's nice, but Braden's the one with job offers, right? I mean, companies must be lining up for a valedictorian in computer science. The question hung in the air because honestly, I hadn't told anyone about the 3 job offers I had received. 2 from major tech companies in California, 1 from a startup in Austin. All of them offering salaries that would have seemed impossible 4 years ago when I was counting quarters to do laundry. Actually, I said quietly, there have been some opportunities. Sarah squeezed my arm, her smile genuine despite everything. Tell them about Google. My parents' heads snapped toward me so fast I thought they might get whiplash. Google? Dad repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. They offered me a position on their artificial intelligence development team. I explained, trying to keep my tone casual. Starting salary is $130,000 plus benefits and stock options. The table fell silent. Aunt Linda started laughing, but it was the good kind of laughter that comes from pure joy. Uncle Marcus looked like he might cry. My cousins were staring at me like I had just announced I was going to Mars. My parents, though, looked like they had been hit by a truck. 130,000? Mom repeated, her voice barely audible. That's the starting salary, I clarified. There are performance bonuses, and the stock options could be worth quite a bit if the company continues to grow. Grandma Helen, who had been quietly listening to everything, suddenly reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. Braden, sweetheart, I've been waiting for the right moment to give this to you. She handed me the envelope, and I could feel something significant inside. What is it, Grandma? Open it later, she said with a wink. But I wanted you to know that some of us have been paying attention to your hard work all along. As the conversation continued around the table, Grandma Helen leaned closer to me and lowered her voice. Can I speak with you privately for a moment? We stepped outside onto the restaurant's patio, away from the noise and chaos of our family celebration. The evening air was cool, and I could see the concern in my grandmother's eyes. Braden, there's something you need to know about your parents. She began glancing back toward the restaurant to make sure no one could hear us. They called me last month asking to borrow money. They're in serious financial trouble. The words hit me like a physical blow. What kind of trouble? Your father lost his job at the tech company 2 years ago. She explained, her voice heavy with worry. Your mother's real estate business collapsed when the housing market shifted. They've been hiding it from you kids, but they're drowning in debt. I stared at my grandmother processing this information. But they've been paying for Sarah's college this whole time. With credit cards, loans against the house, their retirement savings, Grandma Helen said sadly. They've mortgaged their entire future betting on Sarah's success. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. My parents had chosen to invest in Sarah because they thought she was the safer bet, the one more likely to provide financial security. Instead, they had bankrupted themselves funding a college experience that had produced a communications major with mediocre grades, while their son had worked his way to the top of his class and landed a 6-figure job offer. How bad is it? I asked. Bad enough that they might lose the house, Grandma Helen said quietly. They've been putting on a brave face, but the stress is killing them. Your father has aged 10 years in the last 2. I looked back through the restaurant window at my parents, really seeing them for the first time in years. Dad did look older, more tired. Mom's smile seemed forced, her laughter a little too bright. They weren't the confident people who had dismissed my potential 4 years ago. They were scared, desperate people who had made a terrible gamble and lost everything. As we returned to the table, I watched my family with new eyes. The celebration continued, but underneath the joy, I could sense the tension my parents were trying to hide. Every time someone mentioned my success, they flinched slightly. Every time the conversation turned to the future, they exchanged worried glances. Then, just as our main courses arrived, my father's phone rang. He glanced at it, and I saw his face go white. "I have to take this," he said, stepping away from the table. But in his nervousness, he accidentally hit the speaker button before catching himself. For just 3 seconds, everyone at the table heard a professional voice say, "Mr. Thompson, your home foreclosure proceedings will begin Monday unless we receive—" The line went quiet as Dad frantically hit buttons to turn off the speaker, but it was too late. Our entire family had heard enough to understand that my parents were about to lose their house. The celebration died in an instant, replaced by shocked silence and the terrible realization that everything we thought we knew about our family was a lie. The silence that followed my father's phone call was deafening. 23 people sat around 3 pushed-together tables at Romano's Italian restaurant, and you could have heard a pin drop. My father stood frozen by the hostess station phone pressed to his ear, his face the color of old newspaper. Uncle Marcus was the first to speak. "David, what the hell was that about foreclosure?" My mother's fork clattered against her plate, and I watched her carefully composed facade crumble in real time. Her hands were shaking as she reached for her water glass, missing it on the first try. "It's nothing," Dad said as he returned to the table, but his voice lacked any conviction. "Just a misunderstanding with the bank." "Foreclosure proceedings don't start over misunderstandings," Aunt Linda said sharply. She worked as a paralegal and knew exactly what those words meant. "How long have you been behind on payments?" Grandma Helen reached across the table and covered my mother's hand with her own. "Catherine, honey, tell us what's really going on." The dam burst all at once. Mom started crying. Not the gentle tears of a proud parent, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone who had been carrying an unbearable secret for too long. "We lost everything," she whispered between sobs. "David's been out of work for 2 years. My business collapsed. We've been living on credit cards and loans just to keep up appearances." Sarah grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "What do you mean you lost everything?" Dad finally sat back down, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "I got laid off from Technosphere in 2022 when they downsized. I've been consulting here and there, but nothing steady. Your mom's real estate business dried up when interest rates went crazy." "But you've been paying for my college?" Sarah said, her voice rising with panic. "You said you had it covered." "We mortgaged the house," Mom admitted, 3 times. "We maxed out every credit card we could get. We borrowed against my retirement account. We spent everything we had saved for 30 years. Uncle Marcus leaned back in his chair, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You spent your entire retirement funding Sarah's college while Braden worked himself to death? Are you out of your minds?" "We thought Sarah would be more successful," Dad said defensively. "We thought she'd be able to help us when we got older. It seemed like the smart investment." Investment. I finally found my voice, and it came out harder than I intended. "You treated your children like stock options." "That's not how we meant it," Mom said quickly, but even she seemed to realize how hollow the words sounded. Grandma Helen's voice cut through the family chaos like a knife. "How much do you owe?" My parents exchanged a look that told me the number was going to be devastating. $260,000, Dad whispered, between the house loans, credit cards, and personal loans. The number hit the table like a bomb. Sarah made a choking sound. Uncle Marcus started swearing under his breath in a way that would have gotten us kicked out of Sunday school. My cousins were staring at their plates, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. $260,000. I repeated slowly, trying to process the magnitude of their financial destruction. And how much of that went to Sarah's education? About 180,000 acres. Mom said, not meeting my eyes. Tuition room and board her sorority fees, spending money the car we bought her junior year. Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. You spent $180,000 on me. I had no idea it was that much. We wanted you to have the full college experience, Dad explained, but his voice lacked any of the confidence it had held 4 years ago when he'd explained their decision to invest in Sarah's future. While Braden ate ramen noodles and worked 3 jobs, Aunt Linda said, her voice dripping with disgust, "Do you people listen to yourselves?" I sat quietly absorbing the full scope of my parents' financial catastrophe. They had gambled everything on Sarah's potential, convinced that her social skills and charm would translate into financial success. Instead, they had funded 4 years of parties and mediocre grades while their academically gifted son worked his way to the top of his class. "What's your plan now?" Uncle Marcus asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to be homeless with $250,000 in debt and no income." "We thought maybe Sarah would get a good job," Mom said weakly. "Something in communications or marketing that pays well." The timing couldn't have been worse. Sarah had been dreading this conversation all week, and now she was being asked to save the family finances with the degree they had bankrupted themselves to provide. "About that," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you guys something." She looked around the table, her eyes stopping on each family member before settling on our parents. "I don't actually have any job prospects. I've been applying for 3 months, and most companies want experience I don't have or skills I never learned." Dad's face went even paler. "But your professor said you were doing well." "I was doing okay," Sarah clarified. "Mostly B's and C's. I spent more time at sorority events than studying. I don't have any real skills that employers want." The conversation was spiraling into territory that felt almost surreal. My parents had destroyed their financial future, betting on a daughter who was now admitting she had no way to contribute to the family income, while their son sat at the same table with multiple 6-figure job offers. Grandma Helen cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. "There's something else you all need to know." She pulled out another envelope, this one addressed to my parents. "I've been watching this family situation for years, and I've been keeping track of some things you might find interesting." She opened the envelope and pulled out what looked like a detailed financial spreadsheet. "I've been documenting every expense, every loan, every dollar spent on Sarah's education. I've also been tracking Braden's achievements, his work schedule, his academic honors." Uncle Marcus leaned forward. "What kind of documentation?" "The kind that shows exactly how much this family's favoritism has cost everyone involved," Grandma Helen said firmly. "Financial records, academic transcripts, even photos of Braden at his various jobs, while Sarah was posting sorority party pictures on social media." The implications were clear. Grandma Helen hadn't just been observing our family's dysfunction, she had been building a case study of everything that had gone wrong. But before anyone could respond to this revelation, our waitress approached the table with a concerned expression. "Excuse me, but there's a gentleman at the bar who says he knows Braden. He'd like to speak with you if you have a moment." I looked over at the bar and saw a man in an expensive suit watching our table with interest. He looked to be in his early 50s with graying hair and the kind of confident bearing that suggested he was used to being the most important person in any room. "I don't know who that is," I told the waitress. "He said his name is James Morrison, and it's about your future career prospects." The name hit me like lightning. James Morrison was the founder and CEO of Morrison Tech Solutions, one of the fastest-growing software companies in Colorado. He was worth hundreds of millions of dollars and regularly appeared on lists of the most influential business leaders in the state. As our family sat in stunned silence, processing the financial devastation, my parents had revealed one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Colorado was waiting at the bar to speak with me. The irony was so perfect, it felt like something out of a movie. My parents had just admitted they had gambled everything on the wrong child, and now the universe was about to demonstrate exactly how wrong they had been. James Morrison approached our table with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're the most successful person in the room. He was tall, probably 6 feet 2 inches, with silver hair that looked like it cost more to maintain than most people spent on groceries in a month. His suit was definitely custom-tailored, and his handshake felt like a business deal in itself. "Braden Thompson?" he asked, extending his hand. "James Morrison, Morrison Tech Solutions." I hope I'm not interrupting a family celebration. The entire table stared at him like he was a celebrity who had just walked into our local diner. Uncle Marcus actually dropped his fork. Sarah's mouth was hanging open. My parents looked like they were seeing a ghost. "Oh, Mr. Morrison." I managed standing to shake his hand. "This is definitely a surprise. I was having dinner at the bar when I heard someone mention your name in connection with graduating valedictorian from the computer science program." He explained, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone else at the table lean in to listen. "I've been following the top graduates from your university, and your name has come up in several conversations." Grandma Helen gestured to an empty chair. "Please join us. We'd love to hear more." As James Morrison sat down, I noticed my father straightening his tie and my mother frantically trying to fix her makeup. The same parents who had dismissed my potential 4 years ago were now desperately trying to make a good impression on someone who was clearly interested in my career. "Your professors speak very highly of you." Morrison continued, pulling out his phone. "Dr. Richardson in the computer science department sent me your senior thesis on machine learning applications. Impressive work." "Thank you," I said, still trying to process why one of Colorado's most successful entrepreneurs was sitting at my family's graduation dinner. "I'll cut right to the chase." Morrison said, his tone shifting to pure business. "I'm always looking for exceptional talent, and exceptional is exactly what your academic record demonstrates. 4 years of perfect grades while working multiple jobs shows the kind of dedication and intelligence I value in my company." Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, and I could see she was genuinely excited for me, despite everything else that was happening. "I'd like to offer you a position as a senior software developer," Morrison said. "Starting salary is $150,000 plus full benefit stock options and a signing bonus of $25,000. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the kitchen staff clattering dishes 3 rooms away. $150,000 was more money than my parents had ever made in a single year combined, even when they were both working. "That's incredibly generous," I said, my voice catching slightly. "But I should mention I've already received some other offers." Morrison smiled, the expression of someone who was used to competing for top talent. "Google and Microsoft, I assume, maybe Amazon." I nodded, impressed that he already knew about my other prospects. "Here's what I can offer that they can't," Morrison said, leaning forward. "Morrison Tech is smaller, which means more responsibility, faster promotion opportunities, and equity that could be worth millions if we go public in the next 5 years. Plus, you'd be working directly with me on projects that could change the industry." Dad finally found his voice. "Mr. Morrison, we had no idea Braden had attracted this level of attention." The look Morrison gave my father was politely curious, but slightly cold. "Really, with achievements like his, I would have expected his family to be very aware of his potential." Mom jumped in quickly. "We're incredibly proud of both our children. Sarah just graduated too with a degree in communications." Morrison glanced at Sarah with the kind of polite smile successful people give when they're being introduced to someone who isn't particularly relevant to their interests. "Congratulations. Communications can be a challenging field." The difference in his tone when addressing Sarah versus me was subtle, but unmistakable. He was being polite to her, but he was genuinely interested in me. "I'd love to set up a formal meeting next week," Morrison said, pulling out a business card that looked like it was made from actual gold. "Bring your other offers, and we'll see if we can structure something that makes Morrison Tech the obvious choice." As he stood to leave, he paused and looked directly at my parents. "You should be very proud. Your son is going to be incredibly successful." After Morrison left, our table erupted in chaos. Everyone started talking at once, congratulating me and asking questions about the job offer. But underneath the excitement, I could see the growing realization in my parents' eyes of just how catastrophically they had misjudged their children's potential. Uncle Marcus was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. "So let me get this straight. You spent yourself into bankruptcy betting on Sarah's future, while Braden was quietly becoming the kind of talent that billionaires personally recruit." "We had no way of knowing," Dad said defensively, but his voice lacked conviction. "You had every way of knowing," Aunt Linda shot back. "Perfect grades, academic honors, professor recommendations. The signs were all there." Grandma Helen reached into her purse and pulled out yet another envelope. This woman had apparently been documenting our family's dysfunction like an investigative journalist. "Since we're sharing revelations tonight," she said, "there's something else everyone needs to know." She opened the envelope and pulled out what looked like bank statements and financial records. "I've been saving money for both of my grandchildren for the past 15 years. Originally, I planned to give it to them for graduate school or buying their first homes." "How much money?" Mom asked quietly. "Enough to pay off about half of your debt," Grandma Helen said. $130,000. The table fell silent again. My parents stared at their mother-in-law with expressions that mixed hope, shame, and desperation. "But," Grandma Helen continued, "I'm not giving you this money to clean up the mess you made with your favoritism. I'm offering it as part of a solution that treats both of my grandchildren fairly." "What kind of solution?" I asked. "You help your family get back on their feet, but on your terms," she explained. "Your parents acknowledge their mistakes, commit to treating you and Sarah equally, and use this crisis as an opportunity to rebuild their relationship with both of you properly." Sarah had been unusually quiet during this entire exchange, but now she cleared her throat nervously. "There's something else I need to tell everyone." The way she said it made my stomach clench. Her voice carried the same tone she had used when we were kids, and she had broken something valuable, but hadn't figured out how to explain it yet. "The thing is," she began, her hands shaking slightly, "I haven't actually graduated yet." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to spread out of control. "What do you mean you haven't graduated?" Mom asked, her voice rising with panic. "I failed 2 classes last semester," Sarah admitted, tears starting to stream down her face. "I've been partying too much, skipping classes. I owe the university for incomplete coursework and some damage to the dorm. They let me walk in the ceremony as a courtesy, but I don't actually have a degree." The revelation hit our family like a nuclear bomb. Dad made a choking sound. Mom started crying again, harder than before. Uncle Marcus put his head in his hands. "How much do you owe the university?" Aunt Linda asked, her voice deadly quiet. $12,000, Sarah whispered. "For the classes I need to retake and the property damage." I stared at my sister, this person I had shared a womb with, competed with, loved, and resented in equal measure. My parents had spent $180,000 on her education, bankrupted themselves to give her every advantage, and she didn't even have a degree to show for it. The irony was so bitter, it burned. While I had worked myself to exhaustion, earning perfect grades, and attracting job offers from the biggest companies in America, Sarah had been wasting the opportunities my parents had sacrificed everything to provide. But looking at her tear-streaked face, I realized she wasn't the villain in this story. She was just a kid who had been given too much too easily without ever learning the value of hard work or personal responsibility. My parents' favoritism had failed her just as much as it had hurt me. The real tragedy wasn't that they had bet on the wrong horse. The tragedy was that their gambling had damaged both of their children in different but equally devastating ways. As our family sat in the wreckage of 4 years of lies, financial ruin, and misplaced priorities, I realized that this moment was either going to destroy us completely or force us to rebuild our relationships from the ground up. The choice was mine to make. The restaurant had mostly emptied out while our family drama unfolded, leaving us with the uncomfortable privacy of being the only large group left in the dining room. Sarah's confession about not actually graduating hung over the table like a toxic cloud, and I could see our waitress hovering nearby, clearly wondering if she should bring the check or call security. $12,000, Dad repeated slowly, as if saying the number might somehow make it smaller. On top of everything else, you owe the university $12,000. Sarah nodded miserably, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I was going to tell you after graduation. I thought maybe I could fix it, somehow find a way to make up the classes over the summer. What kind of property damage? Uncle Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. There was a party in my dorm suite last month. Sarah explained, her voice getting smaller with each word. Someone put a hole in the wall, and there was water damage from people leaving the bathroom faucet running. The university is holding my transcript until it's paid for. Mom looked like she was about to faint. So the $180,000 we spent on your education bought us nothing. Nothing at all. That's not true, Sarah said quickly. I learned things. I made friends. I had experiences. Experiences. Aunt Linda repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Your parents mortgaged their house 3 times so you could have experiences. I watched this exchange with a mixture of anger and pity. Anger because my parents' favoritism had led to this moment where our family was financially ruined and emotionally destroyed. Pity because Sarah had clearly been set up to fail by parents who had given her everything without ever teaching her accountability. There's more, Sarah said, and somehow her voice managed to get even smaller. More what? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I didn't want to know. I've been lying about my grades for the past 2 years, she admitted. My grade point average isn't actually 2.8. It's 1.9. I've been on academic probation since sophomore year. The silence that followed was so profound, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. 1.9 was barely above failing. It meant Sarah had been coasting through college at the absolute minimum level required to stay enrolled. How is that possible? Dad asked. We got reports every semester. I've been editing them, Sarah said, not meeting anyone's eyes. Photoshop mostly. It's not that hard to change numbers on a digital transcript. Grandma Helen leaned back in her chair, and for the first time all evening she looked genuinely surprised. You've been forging your grades for 2 years. I didn't want to disappoint you. Sarah said, tears flowing freely now. You had invested so much money, so much hope. I thought I could turn it around, bring my grades up eventually. But you didn't, I said, and my voice came out harsher than I intended. You just kept lying and hoping no one would notice. That's rich coming from you. Sarah snapped, some fire returning to her voice. You think you're so perfect with your precious grades and your job offers. You have no idea what kind of pressure I've been under. Pressure. I stood up so fast my chair almost tipped over. You want to talk about pressure? Try working 3 jobs while maintaining a 4.0 average. Try eating ramen noodles for dinner every night because you can't afford real food. Try falling asleep in the library because you're too tired to walk back to your dorm after studying for 18 hours straight. That was your choice, Sarah shot back. Nobody forced you to be a martyr. It was my choice. Because you took the only other option. My voice was loud enough that the few remaining diners in the restaurant turned to stare at us. You and Mom and Dad decided I wasn't worth investing in. So I had to invest in myself. Kids, please. Mom tried to interject, but neither Sarah nor I was listening anymore. You know what the worst part is? I continued, my voice shaking with 4 years of suppressed rage. It's not that you got the money and I didn't. It's that you wasted it. You had every advantage I dreamed of having, and you threw it away on parties and sorority events and fake transcripts. I never asked for this pressure, Sarah screamed back. I never asked to be your parents' investment strategy. Do you think it was fun knowing that every grade, every social interaction, every choice I made was being evaluated based on my future earning potential? Her words hit me like a physical blow because for the first time I realized she was right. My parents' favoritism hadn't just hurt me, it had damaged her too. They had turned her into a commodity, a bet they had placed in the casino of life, and the pressure had crushed her just as surely as their rejection had motivated me. Both of you sit down. Grandma Helen said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that had been keeping this family in line for decades. Now, we sat, both of us breathing hard and glaring at each other across the table. Sarah, you're right that the pressure was unfair, Grandma Helen said. But Braden's also right that you wasted opportunities he would have killed for. And David and Catherine, you're both right that your children are hurt and angry, but you're wrong if you think there's any way to fix this without acknowledging how catastrophically you failed as parents. The brutal honesty of her words hit the table like a bomb. Nobody argued because nobody could argue. She was absolutely right. The question now, she continued, is what we do going forward. Before anyone could answer, our waitress approached the table again, this time with a concerned expression and a cordless phone in her hand. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but there's a phone call for Braden. The caller said it was urgent and related to his graduation. I took the phone, confused about who would be calling me at a restaurant I hadn't told anyone I'd be at. Hello, this is Braden. Braden Thompson. The voice was crisp, professional with a slight East Coast accent. This is Dr. Elizabeth Carter from MIT. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. One of the most prestigious universities in the world was calling me at Romano's Italian restaurant while my family imploded around me. Dr. Carter. I managed trying to keep my voice steady while gesturing for my family to quiet down. This is definitely a surprise. I'm calling because your undergraduate research on machine learning algorithms has caught our attention, she continued. We've been reviewing applications for our accelerated PhD program, and several faculty members have recommended you specifically. I could feel everyone at the table staring at me, but I tried to focus on what Dr. Carter was saying. We'd like to offer you a full scholarship to our doctoral program with a research stipend of $65,000 per year and the opportunity to work directly with our artificial intelligence lab. $65,000 per year just to go to school. More money than most people made working full-time, and I would be earning it while pursuing a doctorate from one of the most respected institutions in the world. The program would start in the fall, Dr. Carter continued. But we understand you may have other commitments. We're prepared to offer some flexibility if you need time to arrange your affairs. I looked around the table at my family, my financially ruined parents, my sister who had just admitted to years of academic fraud, my grandmother who had been secretly documenting our dysfunction, my extended family who were all staring at me like I had just announced I was going to become an astronaut. Dr. Carter, this is an incredible offer, I said. Could I possibly call you back tomorrow? I need some time to discuss this with my family. Of course, she said. But Braden, I want you to know that opportunities like this don't come along often. Your work has impressed some very influential people in the field of artificial intelligence. Don't let anything prevent you from reaching your full potential. As I handed the phone back to the waitress, the entire table erupted in questions and congratulations. But all I could focus on was my parents' faces. They looked like they were watching their son transform into someone they had never imagined he could become. James Morrison's job offer had been impressive. Google's offer had been life-changing. But MIT's offer was something else entirely. It was validation from the highest levels of academia that I wasn't just smart or hardworking, I was exceptional. And my parents were finally beginning to understand exactly what their favoritism had cost all of us. The drive home from the restaurant was the most uncomfortable 20 minutes of my life. Sarah rode in the back seat of Dad's Honda Civic, sniffling quietly and staring out the window. Mom sat in the front passenger seat, twisting her wedding ring around her finger the way she did when she was stressed beyond words. Dad gripped the steering wheel like he was trying to choke it, his knuckles white in the streetlight. Nobody spoke until we pulled into our driveway. The house looked the same as always, a modest two-story colonial with blue shutters and Mom's carefully maintained flower garden, but knowing it was about to be foreclosed on made it seem somehow smaller and more fragile. "We need to talk," Dad said as we walked through the front door, all of us together about what happens next. We gathered in the living room where I had spent countless hours doing homework, while Sarah watched television or talked on the phone with friends. The same room where my parents had told me 4 years ago that I wasn't worth their investment. Tonight, the power dynamics were completely reversed. First, I said taking control of the conversation in a way that felt both natural and strange. "I want everyone to understand exactly where we stand financially." I pulled out my phone and opened the calculator app. "You owe $260,000 in total debt. Dad's unemployed, Mom's business is gone, and you're about to lose the house. Is that accurate?" Dad nodded miserably. "The foreclosure notice gives us 30 days. Sarah owes an additional $12,000 to the university, and she doesn't actually have a degree despite 4 years and $180,000 in expenses." Sarah started crying again, but I pressed on. "Meanwhile, I have 3 job offers. Google at $130,000, Microsoft at $125,000, Morrison Tech at $150,000 plus equity, and now a full ride to MIT with a $65,000 annual stipend." The numbers hung in the air like accusations. Mom made a choking sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "The irony is pretty incredible, isn't it?" I continued. "You gambled everything on Sarah because you thought she was more likely to be financially successful. Instead, she has no degree, no job prospects, and additional debt. Meanwhile, the son you wrote off is looking at a potential lifetime earning capacity in the millions." "Braden," Mom started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not done. What hurts the most isn't the money. It's not even the 4 years of struggling while Sarah got everything handed to her. What hurts is that you looked at your children and decided one of us was worth investing in and one of us wasn't based on your own narrow prejudices about what success looks like." Dad finally found his voice. "We made a mistake. A terrible, devastating mistake. We can see that now." "Can you how?" I asked. "Because I think what you see now is that your bet didn't pay off. That's not the same as understanding what you did wrong." Grandma Helen had followed us home and now sat quietly in Dad's recliner watching the conversation unfold like a judge presiding over a family court. "What do you want us to do?" Mom asked. "How do we fix this?" "I'm not sure you can," I said honestly. "But if we're going to try it, starts with complete honesty about everything. No more lies, no more favoritism, no more treating your children like investment portfolios." My phone rang again and I glanced at the caller ID. James Morrison. "Oh, Mr. Thompson," his voice was as smooth and confident as it had been at the restaurant. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all, Mr. Morrison. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to follow up on our conversation tonight. I've been thinking about your situation, and I'd like to sweeten the offer." I looked around the room at my family, all of them hanging on every word of this conversation. "175,000 starting salary," Morrison continued. "30,000 signing bonus, full health benefits for your entire family and equity. that could be worth several $1,000,000 if we go public as planned. The offer was so generous it took my breath away. Morrison wasn't just trying to hire me. He was trying to solve my family's financial crisis in one move. "There's one more thing," Morrison added. "I understand your sister is looking for opportunities in communications. We have an entry-level position in our marketing department that might be a good fit. Nothing guaranteed, but if she's interested, she could interview." I stared at Sarah, who was looking at me with a mixture of hope and shame. "Mr. Morrison, that's incredibly generous. Can I call you tomorrow with my decision?" "Of course. Take your time." "But Braden, I want you to know that I've built my career on recognizing exceptional talent. You're going to be successful no matter where you go. The question is whether you want to be successful with Morrison Tech." After I hung up, the room fell silent again. Morrison's offer changed everything. $175,000 would be enough to pay off most of my parents' debt, save the house, and give Sarah a chance to rebuild her career. He offered Sarah a job, too. Mom asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "An interview," I corrected, "which is more than she deserves, but maybe exactly what she needs." Sarah looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "Why would you even consider helping us after everything we've done to you?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself all evening. Why was I even thinking about using my success to bail out the family that had written me off? "Because despite everything, you're still my family," I said. "And because I've learned something these past 4 years that you apparently never did. Success isn't just about what you achieve for yourself. It's about how you use those achievements to make things better for the people around you." Dad stood up suddenly and walked to the window, his shoulders shaking. When he turned around, there were tears streaming down his face. "I've been a terrible father," he said, his voice breaking. "We looked at our children and saw dollar signs instead of people. We destroyed our family because we were too arrogant and too stupid to see what was right in front of us." David, Mom started, but he shook his head. "No, Catherine. We need to say this out loud. We failed our son completely. We gave him nothing and expected nothing while he was quietly becoming the most successful person this family has ever produced. And we damaged our daughter by giving her everything without teaching her how to earn it." The admission hung in the air like a confession in church. "The question is," I said quietly, "what are you going to do differently going forward?" "Whatever you want," Mom said immediately. "Whatever it takes to rebuild our relationship with both of you." "Family counseling," I said, "all of us together. You acknowledge publicly to our extended family that you made a mistake. You treat Sarah and me equally from now on, no matter what. And you never, ever make financial or life decisions based on your assumptions about our potential." "Yes," Dad said without hesitation, "all of that." I looked at Sarah, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "And you," I said to her, "you go back to school. You finish your degree properly this time. You pay back the $12,000 you owe. You take whatever job Morrison offers you, and you work harder than you've ever worked in your life." "I will," she said, and for the first time in years, her voice carried real conviction. "I promise I will." My phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Carter from MIT calling back with additional details about their offer. "Braden, I spoke with our department head after our conversation," she said. "We're prepared to offer you something we've never offered an incoming doctoral student before." "What's that?" "A deferred admission. You can work for a year or two in industry, gain some real-world experience, and then join our program with full funding intact. We believe your practical experience would make you an even stronger researcher." The offer was perfect. I could take Morrison's job, help stabilize my family's situation, and still pursue the PhD that would set me up for a lifetime of academic and professional success. As I hung up the phone, I realized that all the pieces were falling into place. not just for me, but for all of us. Morrison's job offer would solve the immediate financial crisis. MIT's deferred admission would secure my long-term future. Sarah would have a chance to rebuild her life and career. My parents would be forced to confront their failures and hopefully become better people. But there was one more conversation I needed to have before I could make any decisions. "Grandma," I said, turning to face the woman who had been quietly observing our family's destruction and reconstruction. "You said you had $130,000 saved up. What exactly are you proposing?" She smiled for the first time all evening, and I could see the satisfaction of someone who had been planning this moment for years. "I'm proposing that we save this family," she said. "But we do it the right way this time." 3 months had passed since that graduation night that changed everything, and I was sitting in my new office at Morrison Tech Solutions, looking out at the Rocky Mountains and thinking about how much can change when people finally decide to tell the truth. The morning after our family confrontation, I had called James Morrison and accepted his offer, but with one condition. I wanted to start immediately and work for 2 years before taking my deferred admission to MIT. Morrison had been so impressed with my family loyalty that he had increased the signing bonus to $40,000 and thrown in a company car. That signing bonus, combined with Grandma Helen's carefully saved money, had been enough to stop the foreclosure proceedings and pay off the most pressing debts. My parents weren't financially free yet, but they were no longer facing immediate disaster. More importantly, they were facing themselves. The family counseling had been brutal at first. Dr. Patricia Williams specialized in family dysfunction, and she had a way of cutting through years of denial and forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths. The first session had been 3 hours of my parents admitting to a neutral third party that they had essentially abandoned one child to invest in another based on nothing more than their own prejudices. "What you did," Dr. Williams had told them during that first session, "was parentified gambling. You turned your children into investments and then doubled down on the one you thought would pay better returns. That's not parenting. That's venture capitalism with people you're supposed to love unconditionally." Dad had cried during that session. Actually cried, which I had never seen before in my life. But the real breakthrough had come during the 4th session, when Sarah finally admitted that she had been just as damaged by their favoritism as I had been. "You never let me fail," she had told our parents, tears streaming down her face. "Every time I messed up, you bailed me out. Every time I wanted to quit something, you made excuses for me. You gave me so much support that I never learned how to support myself." That's when Mom finally understood that their favoritism hadn't helped Sarah any more than it had helped me. They had crippled her by removing all consequences from her actions, just as they had forced me to become stronger by giving me nothing but consequences. Sarah had gotten the interview at Morrison Tech, and to everyone's surprise, including her own, she had impressed them enough to get hired. The position was entry-level answering phones and doing basic marketing support, but it was honest work with growth potential. More importantly, it was work she had earned through her own efforts rather than her parents' connections or money. She was also back at the university taking night classes to finish the coursework she had failed. It was costing her most of her paycheck, but she was determined to actually earn her degree this time. Her grades were improving because for the first time in her life, she understood that there would be real consequences if she didn't take her education seriously. The most surprising change had been in my father. Losing his job and facing financial ruin had forced him to confront some hard truths about his assumptions regarding success and failure. He had started working as a contractor for a small IT company, making about a third of what he had earned at his previous job, but he seemed more at peace with himself than he had in years. "I spent so much time trying to predict which of my children would be more successful," he had told me, during one of our weekly coffee meetings, another requirement of the family counseling. I never stopped to think about whether I was helping either of you become good people. Mom had thrown herself into rebuilding her real estate business, but this time, she was focusing on helping first-time homebuyers rather than chasing big commission checks from luxury properties. The work was more personally meaningful, even if it paid less. But the biggest change was in our family dynamics. My parents had learned to treat Sarah and me as equals, celebrating our achievements without comparing them, and supporting our struggles without playing favorites. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was honest in a way our family had never been before. I had kept my promise to help them financially, but not as a bailout. Instead, I had structured it as a loan with reasonable terms that would be forgiven if they maintained certain conditions. Continued family counseling, equal treatment of both children, and transparent communication about all major decisions. Grandma Helen had been the architect of this entire reconstruction, and I was beginning to understand just how carefully she had planned it. She had been documenting our family's dysfunction not out of nosiness, but because she had known that eventually the truth would need to be told with evidence to support it. "I've been watching this family tear itself apart for years," she had told me during a private conversation. "Your parents are good people who made terrible decisions based on fear and prejudice, but good people can learn to make better decisions if they're forced to face the consequences of their mistakes." The consequences had been severe, but they had also been educational. My parents had learned that success comes in many forms, and that predicting someone's future based on their high school personality is not just unfair, it's stupid. Sarah had learned that natural charm and social skills mean nothing without hard work and genuine achievement. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it can mean choosing to help people become better versions of themselves. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Carter at MIT. "Still planning to join us next year? We have some exciting new research projects that would be perfect for someone with your background." I smiled as I typed back my confirmation. In 18 months, I would be starting my doctoral studies at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, with practical experience from one of Colorado's most successful tech companies. The kid my parents had written off as a bad investment was about to become Dr. Braden Thompson, with career prospects they had never imagined possible. But more importantly, I was part of a family that had learned to value each other as people, rather than as potential return on investment. It had taken a crisis to get us there, but we were finally treating each other with the love and respect that should have been unconditional from the beginning. A knock on my office door interrupted my thoughts. Sarah stood there in her Morrison Tech employee badge holding 2 cups of coffee. "Got a minute for your sister?" she asked, and her smile was different now, less practiced, more genuine. "Always," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. She handed me one of the coffees and sat down. "I wanted to tell you that I got an A- on my statistics midterm." "Sarah, that's fantastic. I know it's not perfect like all of your grades were, but it's the first A I've earned since high school." "It's better than perfect," I told her, and I meant it, "because you worked for it." She was quiet for a moment, staring out at the mountains. "Do you think we're going to be okay? All of us, I mean?" "I think we're going to be better than okay," I said. "I think we're going to be the family we should have been all along." That evening, I had dinner with my parents at the same restaurant where everything had fallen apart 3 months earlier. But this time, the conversation was different. They asked about my work at Morrison Tech with genuine interest rather than desperate hope for financial salvation. They talked about Sarah's progress at school with pride that wasn't mixed with anxiety about their investment. They shared their own struggles and successes with honesty rather than the facade they had maintained for so many years. As we finished dessert, Dad reached across the table and put his hand on mine. "Son, I know I can never fully make up for the years I failed you," he said. "But I want you to know that I'm proud of the man you've become. Not because of your success, but because of your character. You had every right to walk away from this family after what we did to you. Instead, you chose to help us become better people. That says everything about who you are. It says something about who all of us can be, I replied, when we choose to value each other properly. Mom wiped tears from her eyes. We're so sorry, Braden, for everything. For not seeing your potential, for treating you unfairly, for making you feel like you weren't worthy of our investment. You were always worthy. We were just too blind to see it. The important thing is that you see it now, I said, and that we make sure future generations of this family never have to learn these lessons the hard way. As I drove home that night, I thought about the letter I had received that morning from my cousin Tyler, who was starting his senior year in high school. He had written to tell me that our family's story had changed how he thought about success and failure, about the pressure to choose the right path, and the danger of being written off for choosing the wrong one. Seeing what you accomplished after being told you weren't worth investing in made me realize that the only person who gets to determine my worth is me, he had written. Thank you for showing our family what real strength looks like. 6 months later, I received another letter, this one from MIT, confirming my admission to their doctoral program with a research focus on artificial intelligence applications in family systems therapy. Dr. Carter had been intrigued by my personal experience with family dysfunction and recovery, and she thought there might be valuable research opportunities in using technology to help families communicate more effectively. The irony was perfect. My parents' failure to invest in my potential had led me to develop skills and perspectives that would ultimately help other families avoid making the same mistakes. Their bad decision had become the foundation for work that could prevent other children from experiencing what I had gone through. As I prepared to leave Morrison Tech for MIT, James Morrison pulled me aside for a final conversation. You know, when I offered you that job, I was mostly interested in your technical skills, he said. But watching how you handled your family crisis taught me something about leadership that I hadn't understood before. What's that? Real leaders don't just achieve success for themselves, he explained. They use their success to lift up the people around them, even when those people don't deserve it. Especially when they don't deserve it. That's a rare quality, and it's going to take you farther than any technical skill ever could. On my last day at Morrison Tech, Sarah stopped by my office with a small gift. It was a framed photo of our family from the previous month's dinner, all of us laughing together over something Dad had said. We looked like what we had always been supposed to be, people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. I wanted you to have this for your dorm room at MIT, she said, as a reminder of what you helped us become. I looked at the photo, and for the first time in my life, I saw a family where everyone was valued equally, where love wasn't conditional on performance, where success was measured by character rather than achievement. Thank you, I said, for becoming the sister I always knew you could be. The life lesson that emerged from our family's crisis was simple, but profound. Real worth isn't determined by someone else's perception or investment in you. Sometimes the greatest success comes from being underestimated because it forces you to develop strength, resilience, and independence that privileged people never learn. Family love should be unconditional, but respect must be earned through actions, not just blood relations. The greatest victory isn't proving others wrong, but choosing to be the bigger person, while still demanding the respect you deserve. My parents had learned that predicting success based on teenage personalities and social skills was not just unfair, but fundamentally flawed. Sarah had learned that natural charm means nothing without hard work and genuine achievement. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting poor treatment, but it can mean helping people become worthy of forgiveness. Most importantly, we had all learned that families are not investment portfolios. Children are not commodities to be evaluated and ranked based on potential returns. Love, support, and opportunity should be given freely and equally, not as rewards for meeting arbitrary standards of worthiness. As I packed my belongings for the move to Boston, I found the envelope Grandma Helen had given me, that first night at the restaurant. I had never opened it, caught up in all the drama that followed. Inside was a letter written in her careful handwriting. My dear Braden, if you're reading this, it means our family has finally learned to see your true worth. I've been watching you work and struggle and achieve for years, and I've been saving this money not as a reward, but as recognition of what you've already earned through your own efforts. Use it however you think best, but know that it comes with the love and respect you've always deserved, but didn't always receive. Your grandfather would be proud of the man you've become. Love, Grandma Helen. Attached was a check for $25,000, money she had earned and saved over decades of careful planning. Money given not as an investment in my future, but as recognition of what I had already achieved. I called her that evening to thank her and found her at Sarah's apartment, helping her study for finals. Grandma, I just opened your letter, I said. The check, the money, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, she replied. Just keep being the person you've always been. That's all any of us can do. Today, as I write this from my dorm room at MIT, I can see the photos Sarah gave me on my desk. My parents look older, but happier, more at peace with themselves and their choices. Sarah looks confident in a way that comes from earning respect rather than receiving it automatically. I look like someone who has learned that the greatest victory isn't achieving success despite your family's lack of support, but helping your family learn to support each other properly. The boy who was told he wasn't worth investing in became a man who invested in others, even when they didn't deserve it. The family that almost destroyed itself with favoritism and financial ruin became a family that learned to value love over money, character over achievement, and forgiveness over resentment. We had all learned that success isn't just about what you accomplish for yourself. It's about how you use those accomplishments to make the world a little bit better for the people around you, especially the people who didn't believe you could succeed in the first place. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by your family or people close to you? How did you prove them wrong? And what did that experience teach you about your own strength? Share your story in the comments below, because your experiences might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges and finding success on your own terms. And don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear that being underestimated isn't a limitation. It's an opportunity to discover just how strong you really are. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth isn't determined by other people's investments in you. It's determined by your own commitment to becoming the person you know you can be. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having people bet against you, because it forces you to bet on yourself in ways that create strength you never knew you had.